When I named the company Carol's Daughter, I, of course, did not know I would lose my mom in 2003. I always allowed myself space to cry, but I didn't walk around with gloom and doom.
Hey, it's your girl Nancy Red, and this is season 4 of Mompreneurs, where we celebrate beautiful Black entrepreneurs who are also amazing moms. Now, every week, I'm chatting with my guests about how they're killing it simultaneously as a business mogul and as a mom, and we're listening to their inspiring journeys and incredible advice. I'm so excited about this week because we are diving into the incredible journey of a mom who over 3 decades ago, with the encouragement of her mama, turned her kitchen experiments into a national empire. Lisa Price is the founder of Carol's Daughter, which started with a lot of love, very little kitchen space, and just a few homemade products that she sold at flea markets, and went on to build a brand that is changing and has changed the face of hair and beauty for women of color. Then she sold the company with great success, still continued to run it, and now, a decade later, she is back at the helm, and we cannot wait to hear more. Because from mom to mogul, Lisa's story is one of vision, hustle, and heart. Welcome to Mompreneurs, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's nice to hear mompreneur as opposed to entrepreneur.
Well, that's what's so fun about this show, because how old were your kids when you started Carol's Daughter?
When I started Carol's Daughter, I didn't have any children yet. So I started in 1993, and then my first child was born in 1996.
Wow, so your very first baby.
Yes,
yes. Is Carol's Daughter.
My very first baby is Carol's Daughter, yes.
So what's so funny about that is you talk a lot about the importance of the name, as it's your mother, and she passed away 20 years ago, and you always see her mother. It's interesting when we think about the legacy of a mother. It's often not necessarily tied to monetary value, but emotional value. And what is it like to have a billion-dollar brand with the face of the woman who, through thick and thin, like you said, always was glass half full, always by your side? What is it like to have this legacy with her name on the label, but also your first title, which was daughter?
When I named the company Carol's Daughter, I got like that butterfly feeling, that goosebump kind of feeling. And until you're an entrepreneur for a while, you don't recognize that as that gut instinct. So that was sort of the first time that I recognized that feeling, and then could recognize it more and more each time that I had it. And then grateful that I trusted that gut feeling, because I, of course, did not know that in 1993, I would lose my mom in 2003. You think in your head they're going to live on forever. And it was sometimes difficult, but for the most part, very comforting to go to work every day, to look at her name on packaging, to look at her name on your computer screen, on the website, and to have that very tangible feeling of she's still with me every day. She's watching me every day. And because she was the type of person that didn't want you grieving and sad and sorrowful, it was also a reminder to remember the good things. I always allowed myself space to cry, but I didn't walk around with gloom and doom. So for so many different reasons, I'm so grateful that I named the company after her, because I also get to share how great she was, what a great mom she was, when I do things like this and people ask, so who's Carol? Did she used to make body care products, And she was also a wonderful test subject. She was always very appreciative of goodies to sample and try out and give me feedback.
I love that. Because the reason the show's called Mompreneurs is, generally speaking, in our families, it's the moms holding it down. Often we have a lot of side hustles. We're moms, we're business ladies. We have actual jobs. When you first started Carol's Daughter, you were not an entrepreneur. You were working in film and TV.
Yes, I worked in television and film production. It was a great career for me because it never really got boring. Things changed up. Once I got accustomed to the disruption of income, because you work on a show and you could be on a show for 3 years and then you could be on a commercial for 3 days. It's very random. But
Yes,
once I got,
we're in the entertainment industry, and there's a phrase that one of our favorite mentors says, it's kind of difficult to make a living, but you can make a killing.
That's very good. That's very good. And I didn't realize that it was training for being an entrepreneur. So I got accustomed to not having that regular paycheck, if you will, being more frugal, and then also working long hours, working weekends. There were a lot of Saturdays that I was working on television or film gigs. So when I had to work for my business, it wasn't a new thing. I had already honed those skills quite well.
So when you look at this, your mother encouraged you to start this business. You started small with just $100 at a flea market. At what point did you realize, what was the moment where you realized this was more than just a side hustle? This was an empire in the making.
It probably took me a while to get to empire because that just seemed, out of it didn't look like what I was doing at the time. But I was able to see, oh, maybe this can actually be my main job. Maybe it will earn enough that I can contribute towards the household. And when I did end up having children, I thought, oh, I won't have to worry about a babysitter. Well, I definitely had to worry about babysitter because I couldn't be mom full time and work a business as well. But those were the things that I was thinking initially. And there were several moments of, oh, wow, maybe we can do this. Oh, wow, maybe we can do that. And I think that happens when you start very tiny. You start out at a desk, you start out in your kitchen, and then you get another apartment and you're like, well, maybe I can dedicate this room to production and my office and a shipping center, and then you move into another place and then it's like, okay, the basement can be this, and because you just keep expanding. So yeah, there were many phases of, oh, this is becoming more, oh, now I need employees. That was another phase. Like, I can't do all of this by myself. I need help to do this.
Yes, and some of your first help were your family members. And before
Yes.
we get too far into the business side of things, let's go back and let's talk about who in your life puts the mom and mompreneur. Who's in your beautiful household? You mentioned your husband. You've got 3 kids.
I do have 3 offspring, let's put it that way, but they're no longer kids. So now
are you telling me there's going to become a time where your kids you consider them to be grown adults who are fully functioning in the world?
Well, okay, fully functioning? We're not there yet. In the house currently, my second born, Andy, my daughter, still lives with us. And it's a great thing, and not because, her other siblings or whatever. She's just a different personality. So she was the kid when she was a kid where you had to ask everybody, is Andy home? Is she here? Andy, are you up there? Like you had to check and make sure that she was present because she was very to herself. So Andy still lives in the house with us. We also have a dog, which is technically my eldest's dog. So my eldest, who's my son, he lives in Atlanta. And when he moved to Atlanta for work, he left Roscoe here. So Roscoe's the grand dog. That's the only baby in this house is Roscoe. And the youngest child is Becca, and Becca will be 19 in about a month. Oh, actually a month from today. She'll be 19 a month from today, and she just moved out in May. But she's only a block away. She's very close by. But wanting to be independent and all of that. So still a mompreneur because there is a thing with being a mom and a dad to adult kids. You know, that's the thing that they don't tell us about. They kind of tell us about when they're babies and toddlers and when they're in school and the projects, and nobody tells you what it's like when they're 25 and
there are no books.
You're still doing
someone
it.
needs to write a book about, because everyone talks about the first few years, how to be. I have a tween and a teen, and I'm just trying to figure out, how do I get them to launch successfully, while at the same time trying to work on my businesses, right?
Right.
Interestingly enough, you started Carol's Daughter before you became a mother, but you became a mother pretty soon in this journey. This journey's over 30 years old. You became a mom 3 years in. How did motherhood shape your journey? Like you said, you thought, okay, well, this will be a great little mom hustle. Not so much. This ended up being its own universe.
Definitely. For me, it shaped my journey as a mom in teaching me to sit still. Surprisingly, like, you wouldn't think about that with children, but I was very driven and a workaholic, and strived for perfection, and always tried to get everything on the list done. And I could kind of achieve that before Forrest was born, the first one. And then Forrest comes along, and I'm nursing Forrest, and I'm nursing on demand. So there's these times of day, whether there's a sitter there or not, where you have to stop what you're doing and feed your baby. And I often would reflect on this, that if I wasn't a nursing mom, how many times would I have kept working and prepared the bottle and given somebody else the bottle to give to Forrest? That might have happened a couple of times throughout a day. And I'm grateful that I didn't do that, and that I got those moments to be still, because it reminded me later, when Forrest is in daycare and Envy is, at nursery school or whatever, that I could take a minute and drink a cup of tea. I could take a minute and just look out the window. So they taught me how to slow down. And for context, Forrest and Envy, the first two, are only 19 months apart. So that was kind of bam, bam, And it was a bit like having twins. And it was very much these times where you just learn how to go with the flow. And then the youngest one came into the mix about 10 years in. So Forrest was 9 or 10 and Envy was 7, 8. And she was adopted. So she wasn't a surprise. It was definitely choice and plan and all of that. Because at this point, I'm more of an entrepreneur, and I'm traveling for the business, and I'm teaching and all of the things. And so when I would speak at different events, people would always ask, how do you juggle it all? How do you manage being a mom and, running a business? A question, by the way, that men are never asked. So I would notice the difference when I was at an event that was majority women versus events that were majority men. No one ever asked men that question. And so what I would usually tell people is that you don't get everything done. It's not so much about balance, it's a bit more juggling. And at that time, I had, a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old, and then I had a baby. If the 9-year-old falls down, he's going to be okay. If the 8-year-old, trips, she's going to be okay. But if I drop the baby, that's a problem.
And it's definitely a problem.
Right. So that's how I prioritized making that analogy. You have to worry about the things that you have to worry about, and then there's other stuff that you just have to let go, because you can't get everything done. You just can't.
You can't. You absolutely can't. And I just, first and foremost, I'm very excited to hear that your baby is adopted, that your youngest child is adopted, no longer a baby, 19 years old. Because it's such a big issue in the Black community. Can you share a little bit about how her adoption came to be?
Sure. So my husband and I, coincidentally, we grew up in households with foster care and adoption. My mother fostered and adopted 6 children. And his mother fostered maybe more than six, but about the same number. And of the six, she was able to adopt two of them. We, had the first two. I had a miscarriage after the first two. And I didn't want to go through extra efforts to conceive. I felt like I was already blessed with having conceived the two that we did. And I didn't feel the need to, spend money and time trying to do something else. Maybe it meant we just open up the family in a different way. So we explored adoption, and we adopted her through the New York foster care system. And it was great. It was great. She fit right in. She came into our home at just about 4 months old, and was a spitfire even at 4 months old.
I love that. And a lot of people listening to this, all of us, I have a rainbow baby myself, which is the colloquial term for when you've had a miscarriage and then you have another child. And it's a very under-discussed topic. Do you have any words of wisdom for anyone who is busy, who's out there, who's trying to figure out her fertility, her motherhood journey, and her mompreneurship, her entrepreneurship? Any words of wisdom for people considering adoption?
Do your research for sure. There's different ways to adopt, and private adoption is very different from adopting within the foster care system. And it's important to get as much information as you can about birth parents. But the other thing that is super important to remember, especially if you've already been a parent, there's a belief within the adoption circles that if you adopt a child at a very young age, that nurture is going to trump nature. So you adopt a baby, the baby is 3 months old, 4 months old, 5 months old, they're not verbal yet. They're not going to remember anything about their past. They're 4 months old. They don't know who mom is, your mom, your dad. You don't have to worry about that. And it's just not true. Nature trumps nurture. And you can't ignore nature. You can't ignore their past. And together with their doctors, and if you have, a family therapist, you have to know the right time to tell them who they are and how they came into your life. And you have to allow space and grace for their confusion, for their anger, for them to maybe not feel welcome, because at the end of the day, they grew inside of someone else's body and perhaps never made connection with that person. And having been a mother, we know what that feels like when we carry someone and then we make a connection with them. And just imagine if you carried someone and never made the connection, like you never met each other. You would think about that person out in the world, prayerfully out in the world. You would wonder what it would be like if you had met them. And it's the same for the baby. Even though they make you think when you're adopting them, oh, it's an infant, you'll be fine. They're not going to remember anything about the past. No, they remember those voices that they never got to say hello to.
That's so important. And I think so much of what you're saying is just the basis of being a good mother in general, a good parent for your child. Like, everyone's nature is their nature. And I even think sometimes you hear you should tell them about their grandparents, you should tell them about their uncles. Mm-hmm. you should read, whether or not it's a birth child or not, helping people understand themselves. Mm-hmm. And is instead of just trying to fit them into a little box, because we're all a little guilty of that. But I think that's one of the beautiful things. You and your husband came from giant families of birth origin, of not birth origin, and you've evolved more than most of us to understand the importance of respecting humanity. How has that served you with Carol's daughter? Because I think one of the things that you've been really good at is pivoting, rolling with the punches. Those are things you learn when you're not a single child. Yes. Those are things you learn when you are sharing with a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I always learned from my mom that the glass is half full, it's not half empty. So even when something is difficult, I'm looking for well, what is the positive within it? And then more recently, like within the last 5 years or so, since I've been in therapy, learning that I can't completely ignore the difficulty, because I used to just say, oh, it's not half empty, it's only half full. But two things can exist at the same time. It is half empty, but it's also half full. And we can choose to focus on the positive side of it while still acknowledging that there's a challenge, that it's difficult, that there's a deficit. And I think that's important, to acknowledge how you feel about something, to acknowledge that maybe something is hard, but then finding a way through it and finding a way to pivot.
Carol, you are such a role model, not just as a mogul, but as like a human being, because you're hitting all the things that are my passions, being a good parent. Like you understand it's the business and the family. You've always said Carol's Daughter is a family first business, but it wasn't a mom first business. So I love to hear that in these years, after the acquisition, which comes with pros and cons, we'll talk about that a little bit later, you took a little time for yourself. Was 5 years ago when you started therapy, was that your first foray into self-discovery?
It was my first foray into therapy that was just about me. I had been in couples therapy at one point with my husband years ago, and then we were in family therapy with different issues with the children here and there, but I had never sat down and talked to a therapist just about myself. And so I started to learn about things from my childhood that was still playing out decades later. It's remarkable, and I'm very blessed that I, can have that in my life, and I can't imagine my life without it.
Out of curiosity, do you think going to therapy encouraged you to buy your business back?
I wouldn't say that it encouraged me to buy my business back, but what it did do was teach me when I needed to step back from something and not try to control it. A phrase that my therapist used once was, "You're trying to make everything look pretty." And at first when she said it, I was like, well, that's kind of superficial. I don't just want to make things look pretty. And she said, no, she said, hear me out. You have actually made a living, a good living, off of making things look pretty. People are going to go and do their hair. You have products that help their hair look pretty. It helps it smell good. It helps them to feel good. Learning how to not try to fix things that I thought I could fix helped me operate within my business in a different way when I was in the corporate space. And then when the opportunity presented itself that I could be an owner again, I was in a better place to understand. I know who I was as an entrepreneur before. I know who I was as an employee. And now I get to be an entrepreneur again, but I know so much more than she did back then. This could be fantastic because I figured out this, I know how to manage this. This doesn't trigger me in the same way. Not that I'm perfect, but I have so much more information now. I have so much more confidence now. And if I did all that I did back then with all of the things that she was dealing with, God only knows what I could do today. But I don't think I would have been able to see that clearly had I not gone through the 5 years of therapy. And then within that, taking a mental health break, stepping away from work for the first time in my life for 5 months.
Yeah, you took a 5-month sabbatical, right?
Yes. No.
Which okay, so this is
no
very important.
email.
And this was very recent. This was towards the end of the L'Oreal years. You took a 5-month sabbatical, which sounds impossible to many of us, right? Especially because Black women's kryptonite is the C word that you said, control. I suffer from it. Your therapist sounds like my therapist. We're very lucky to have the privilege to unpack a lot of these things that come from a lot of social issues. I encourage everyone listening to this to do like Lisa and me, get you a therapist that's going to help you unpack this control stuff. Because before therapy, could you have imagined taking 5 months for yourself? No. Would the world fall apart if you took 5 days?
Yes. And I had leave prior because I had foot surgeries a couple of times where I couldn't walk on my foot for months. But I was taking meetings from my phone in bed. I was emails, packages being shipped to my house, giving approvals on stuff. This time, because things were so tense and there was so much going on, I remember having the conversation with my therapist, and she said, you're having issues and stress at work. You're having issues with your youngest child. And then the issues with your youngest child are spilling over into your home life. And she said, which one of those things can you actually turn off? And the only one that I could turn off was work. Because work, there was a whole team there running things and doing things. And technically, I could step away. And initially, I was so stressed out that I was wondering, am I supposed to retire now? Is that what the universe is telling me, that it's time for me to just walk away because this is all just too hard? And she said, you can't make a decision like that now. You're under too much stress. If you weren't going through everything that you're going through with your youngest, would you even ask that question? And I said, I don't think so. She said, so then you can't make a decision like that. She said, but you can step away and breathe. And I set up the call with HR to ask for the break. And just being on the call and asking, I started sobbing. I probably scared the person half to death. And they basically said, okay, so your leave starts right now. I'll send you the email link for the paperwork. And I was like, okay, thank you so much. A basket case. But I think I just needed to say the words out loud.
And those tears, talked about what those tears are. They were not tears of regret, pent up tears. Carol's daughter didn't just happen out of nowhere. You had you have been living your life for thousands of people.
Yeah.
From birth, technically, but that's a whole other can of worms. But definitely from your mid-30s.
Yeah, for sure. And
so that's 30 years of Lisa being second banana.
And it was the level of emotion that made me look at this and say, I can't do this the way that I did before. I really do have to turn off. I have to trust that my 30-something-year-old firstborn will be fine with these other people, but her mother has to take care of herself because I'm not good to anybody like this. And it made it easier for me to pull away. And then it was remarkable to come back and realize that the house didn't burn down. Now, were there some decisions made that maybe I wouldn't have co-signed? Yeah, but nothing earth-shattering, life-threatening, nothing that was insurmountable. And I came back with a different energy, a different way of approaching things. Everything wasn't so dire. I felt like I could be not more collaborative, because it was already a collaborative situation, but I could eat in an easier way, let certain things go. Like, you know what? That's not really worth my energy. I'm going to focus on that. I didn't have this desire to be in every single meeting. You know, like I left with a stack of meetings every day. I came back and I was like, no, I only need to do 3 of these today. And then I can spend time writing, and then I can spend time ideating. And then tomorrow I'll do another 2, you know? I couldn't do that before. I felt like I had to show up for everything. I have to be present. They have to know that I'm here. And so the work became more efficient and less rote.
Taking the step back made you realize how much control that you ceded actually gave you more control. I think that's the thing that I have had to realize is that I think by touching everything, I'm doing everybody a service, but touching everything means that the things that really deserve your touch, deserve your creativity, deserve what makes you special, what made Carol's daughter, that means they get the short end of the staff, of the stick. So now you are independent, which
Hmm.
is a whole other can of worms. You were with the company all this time, except for the 5 month sabbatical. That was an excellent thing to take. What does independence mean for the mission of Carol's Daughter, for what you do, especially as one of the few Black-owned national beauty brands? Like, how will you continue? How will you execute upon this new enlightened version of Lisa Price, founder and CEO of Carol's Daughter?
Well, I think the best part is being able to be more nimble. Making those changes within a large corporation that must operate with process so that everybody within that corporation, all the brands operate smoothly and everything works, spinning in grooves, if you will. It means that you plan 2 years out. And if the industry shifts within that 2 years, you still got to make it work. You can't flip the script and change your launch. When you're independent and it's just your company and you're not woven into this big process, you can be more nimble and you can act a bit quicker and experiment with a bit more creativity. And then to couple that with being someone who is more knowledgeable, more confident, smarter about how I work, I don't feel as fearful as I felt when I was independent before. And when you live through the nightmare and the sun still comes up the next day and your kids are healthy and your husband is good and you're still living your life, you realize that it wasn't that deep. And like you said, it's not really your fault. So that's the person that sits here today.
And now when I look at it, it looks like you're building a legacy. This period is you building a legacy. And how would you define the legacy you're trying to build as a mother, as a mompreneur, as a cultural leader?
I believe that, and I hope this to be true, that my children have been able to see that there are options to how you can work and how you can live. My oldest is he's an old soul for someone who's only 29. He's a lot like his dad. He feeds off of other people's energy and loves to engage people in conversation. But he's also very ADD and can't sit still, would never thrive in an office space. And he's an assistant manager at an auto parts chain in Georgia and is the happiest that he has been in years because he loves cars, and he has loved cars since before he could spell car. And he loves to geek out and be a nerd about cars. And he gets to do that at work with customers, with clients, with staff, but then also gets to earn a living, and he's not miserable. So I think that he learned you might have to sacrifice some income, some luxuries, things like that, but it's important to be happy at the work that you do. It's important to have a passion for what you do. And if you can work the passion into your hobby and get the balance there, great. But if you can work it into how you make a living, even better. And I think that's an important legacy. And then there's the legacy for other entrepreneurs, for other mompreneurs, to see that the story doesn't have to end with an acquisition. Because the first person that I thought of when this opportunity presented itself, I thought about Bobbi Brown. Bobbi Brown went from Bobbi Brown Cosmetics to Jones Road Beauty. Bobbi is in her 60s and she has a bed and breakfast hotel. She has other businesses in Montclair, New Jersey that she and her husband have invested in. And now she started a new beauty company with Jones Road. And then being the person that I am, where I was one of the first to start a brand based on natural hair, the only one that's been around for 32 years, the first company to get equity from, equity partners, to acquisition, to reclaiming the brand. I end up being that auntie that people track down and reach out, whether it's over DM or they get my email from someone or my phone number, and they don't have anybody else to talk to because there aren't that many of us that look like us in this space, and they need help. And now I'm sure that there's other women as successful as me, if not more, that maybe there's other people that can be called. But in 32 years, I've definitely gotten, those messages like, I need help. I don't know how to do this.
But that's also part of the need for the therapy, because when you're the only, I remember I was in college and I did something and I was like really proud of myself. I think I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and I'd won $250,000. I was a college student. It was really fun. It was very exciting. I get this call and they're just like, it's great that you are the first Black person to win so much money, but make sure you're not the only. And I'm like 20 years old. I'm like, oh my God. But I mean, it was very important. But there's a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah.
That's at a different echelon. There's all this pressure. I mean, make sure. And that's really great. But you do that. This is very important. What's so great about Lisa, everyone listening, is she sends the elevator back down. She walks down the stairs and up the stairs. It's an easy lift. It's a heavy lift. And one of the things I'm really proud of you for is the fact that in 2021, you actually partnered with another one of our mompreneurs, Latham Thomas, and her foundation, the Mama Go Foundation. I want everyone to hear this story because this is a great example. Okay, obviously you're a very busy lady. You got a lot going on. You got a husband, you got 3 kids, you got this whole business you got going on, but you still made time to reach out under auspices that might not necessarily that are important to you. Talk to us about how Love Delivered, which is what you partnered with Latham to create.
As a company, we were looking for what our philanthropic effort was going to be. And there are a number of things that I care about. And Black maternal health was definitely one of them. In your life when you're really busy, you'll say something like, I just want to get off the merry-go-round for a little while. I just need it to stop. And I felt like during the pandemic, the merry-go-round stopped and I got to get off. And during that time, I thought about Latham and I said, I bet she knows of an organization that maybe we could work with because she's a doula and this is, her world. And so I reached out to her and then she came back to me and she said, you're not going to believe this, but I'm completing my paperwork now for Mama Glow Foundation to be a 501(c)(3). And I was like, what? So that started it. So it started with audio notes. And then when we could go outside, we went for walks and we just talked about what this could look like and what it could be. And when I brought it to the team from day one, they were like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is amazing. This is exactly what we needed. And then we had to take it through the corporate process, and get it approved and set up. But from the very beginning, it was that thing that you start talking about it and it just makes you feel all mushy and warm and great inside. When you had to do work for it, whether it was events or shoots, no one showed up like, oh gosh, got to get this stuff done. Everybody showed up like, isn't this great? I'm so glad we get to do this. And everybody had their own, whether it was their personal or of a friend, a birth story, not necessarily tragic, but not really what they wanted, that feeling of not being heard, that, sometimes disrespected. And if we could change one birth, it meant the world.
And some of those babies that you help to have good birth stories will hopefully grow up, and in 3 decades, they will be seeing Carol's Daughter on the shelf themselves, because that's the goal of this new chapter. And so, yes. Our time is almost up, but I can't let you leave without participating in my favorite segment, which is called Mompreneurs Manifestation. And I always ask all of our guests, what are they trying to make happen right now with their companies? And how can we help to bring it into the universe for you?
What I am manifesting now and what I ask for every day when I say my prayers for the company is that the customer is patient with us. Because, we announced in March that I'm an owner again and it's independent. So people expect that by May, where's the new products? Where's the, and we can't really bring you the new products until back half 26, early 27, because development, testing, all of that stuff takes time. And you also have to unravel yourself from this very complex corporate structure. So I have been praying for everyone to have patience and grace with us, and be ready for 2026, when the newness will start to flow and show up and show out.
We ready, girl. And you know what makes me happy? You're ready. You're in such a great place. It's so hard. It's so hard for those of you who have smaller children right now. Like, nothing prepares you as these kids get older. Everyone says, oh, it gets easier. I personally think it's harder, but that's a whole other conversation, Lisa. I need to have you back on to talk about. And you're doing a great job. You're a wonderful role model for holistically and wholeheartedly growing your business as well as yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Can you tell everyone where they can find you on the internet?
I am mostly an Instagram person, but I do have a presence on TikTok, and I am Lisa Price on both. And we have our website, carolsdaughter.com. Right now, carolsdaughter.com is information, and when you click to shop, it takes you to our Amazon store. By the end of the summer, you will be able to shop on Carol's Daughter. You'll still be able to shop on Amazon, but our site will be D2C once again.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, that's where you can find me.
I love it so much, and I'm so proud of you. This is incredible. Thank you, Auntie. Thank you, Mama, for just being a light in our life. And thank you to all of our listeners and our watchers. As a reminder, a brand new episode of Mompreneurs goes live every Monday on Urban One Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit urban1podcast.com to learn more. That's urban1podcast.com.